Well, good morning, everybody. Greetings from the Green Republic of Marin County, where I live, where we have just created a Marin Clean Energy Authority. But I digress. I'm here to follow up Michelle's great presentation on carbon pricing by talking about what is going on at the national level to complement all the wonderful things you are doing here on the local level. Let's see. Oh, this is the, okay. And as you probably know, there was a so-called climate bill introduced, not actually introduced, it was a draft that was handed out for circulation yesterday by Senator Kerry and our old friend, Senator Lieberman. 987 pages for starters. And as I say, they called it a climate bill. But I don't have the 987 pages. All I have with me this morning is a 20-page summary. So I'm not going to, obviously read it all, but let me give you the gist of it. Title I, this climate bill, is called Nuclear Power. And it has more subsidies, more tax breaks, more permit expedition, or whatever, it's everything the nuclear industry could possibly dream of. Okay, that's Title I of our climate bill. Title II, offshore oil and gas. Obviously, we need more of that in order to fight climate change. Title III, coal, the future of coal. Coal, you might think coal would not have much of a future in a climate-conscious country, but no. Coal has a great future here because it's going to be clean, and it's going to be buried underground forever and ever. So there's all sorts of money allocated for this fantasy of carbon capture and sequestration. And we go on, and finally, there's a section called renewable energy. Sounds good, doesn't it? Just what we want. Okay, what is the key part of this section? It's called voluntary renewable energy markets. Voluntary renewable energy markets, which states voluntary renewable energy markets can be efficient and effective programs for supporting renewable energy. It is the policy of the United States to continue to support these voluntary renewable energy markets. In other words, nada. Voluntary, whatever happens for renewable energy, that's fine, we love it. And it goes on and on. I won't bore you with it. Oh, yeah, there is an ostensible carbon cap in there somewhere. But then there are all sorts of, exemptions and delays. And most of all, there are this thing called offset trading, which Michelle really didn't mention, but she has done really a definitive study on offsets. And it makes the notion of a carbon cap absurd, because it basically says that, okay, you're a polluter here in the US, you're a power plant, let's say a coal-burning power plant. Theoretically, your emissions are capped, but in fact, they're not, because all you have to do is go to Goldman Sachs, which in turn will go to someone, let's say, in China or Malaysia or Brazil, who will promise not to cut some trees that they otherwise would have cut. And so you'll pay them a little money for that promise. Instead of cutting this tree or this forest, they'll just shift and cut that forest, so there's no net gain. But meanwhile, the polluter here in the US continues to carry on as usual. And we claim that we're reducing carbon emissions efficiently and effectively by doing this, but it's a fraud. It enriches Wall Street. You know, to the extent that anything is done, it's done somewhere else, not in the U.S., so we don't transform our economy. So that's the cap and trade provision in this bill. And anyway, we have been waiting for maybe 10 months for Kerry and Lieberman to cut all these deals with the lobbyists of the polluting industries to produce this bill. If some nefarious supporter of fossil fuels had wanted to come up with a strategy for preventing climate legislation to pass in this session of Congress, they couldn't have done a better job than what John Kerry and Joe Lieberman have done in dragging their introduction of this draft bill out for 10 months, so that now we're practically out of time in this legislative session, and it doesn't look likely that anything good is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen this year, it's probably even less likely that it would happen in the future Congresses, where we are unlikely to have even 59 Democratic votes in the U.S. Senate. So we may be missing a historic opportunity here to pass not just a crummy bill, but a good bill. So what I really want to talk about is the good bill that we could pass this year. It's just possible. And that is the CLEAR Act that has been introduced. It actually has a Republican co-sponsor and a Democratic co-sponsor, Senators Cantwell and Collins. And many of you here in Sonoma County know about this. And in fact, I think Sonoma County has more city councils that have endorsed this legislation than perhaps any other county in the country. So congratulations to all of you. This bill is only 39 pages, and I can explain it. It can be explained in roughly 5 minutes. It doesn't have any subsidies for nuclear power. It doesn't have any offshore oil drilling. It doesn't have any clean coal subsidies. It doesn't have any offsets so people can do funny things overseas that avoid having them reduce pollution here. What else doesn't it have? It doesn't suspend the EPA's regulatory authority over carbon. So it doesn't have a lot of bad things. But what it does have is essentially a very simple, transparent, and fair and economically progressive mechanism for capping and pricing carbon pollution. So let's see, are the slides working? I can't quite see, but that should be, does that say basic architecture there? Yes. It does, all right. So how does the CLEAR Act work? It's, as I say, quite simple. The basic architecture is you have a fuel supply. Oh, there we go. Now I see it. Yeah, I got it. Okay, I didn't know that was there. You have a fuel supply cap at the top of the economy. That's the first thing. So it's like a valve that you can crank down a certain percentage per year until you get down to where we need to be. So it starts with a carbon fuel supply cap. Then any company that is going to bring carbon into the economy has to buy a permit. 100% of those permits have to be paid for, purchased at auction. There are no free giveaways. The polluters pay, as Michelle said. That's the key point. And then that will lead to a lot of money flowing. Once you put a price on pollution, all of a sudden there's a lot of money moving around that wasn't moving before. And where all that money goes is crucially important. And this architecture says 75% of that money goes back to us equally, one person, one share, as the equal co-owners of the atmosphere. And 25% is used for various public investments in clean energy. Now, you may ask, why does 75% come back to us? Why not put 100% of it into investments in clean energy? The reason for returning 3/4 of the revenue to the people is that the cap is going to raise the price of energy, which is going to have a negative impact on all of our pocketbooks. Companies are going to have to pay the higher prices, but the companies are going to pass those higher prices on, and ultimately it's going to hit us, families, households, consumers, because we don't have anybody that we can pass on the higher prices to. We're the end of the line. So we pay not only directly for electricity and gas, but all the products we buy, which embody carbon-based fuels for their manufacture or distribution, those prices are going to go up. We're going to have to pay for that. This way, we get money back. Those of us who drive the SUVs, have the big houses, take jets all around the planet and so forth, we'll also get some money back, but the amount of money we're going to be paying in higher prices will exceed what we get back. So we will have a net loss. For those of us, like I'm sure all of you, who don't drive SUVs, who bike everywhere, who conserve energy, we will come out ahead. That is to say, the money that comes back to us in the dividend will exceed what we're paying in higher prices. So we're rewarded for good behavior. The gas guzzlers are penalized for bad behavior. That is exactly the right kind of incentive system we need. Anyway, I'm going on, but that's the basic architecture of this plan. It's very simple. You can lay it all out in 39 pages. The reason for this architecture is that it creates this simple market mechanism that steadily reduces emissions. That's obvious. The second reason is, as I said, it enables us to put a price on carbon pollution, to internalize that cost, which is now externalized, without making us all poorer in the process. And it's simple, it's transparent, it's easy to enforce without a huge bureaucracy, because the cap is only on it's a couple of thousand companies that are the major fuel producers. It's not a cap on emissions. No, there's no bureaucrats running around checking on your home and your automobile and your office and all the, the small emitters. The basic idea is companies like Exxon, Peabody Coal, El Paso Natural Gas, the first sellers of carbon-based fuel, they're the ones that need to buy these permits, and once a year, you don't have to monitor smokestacks. Once a year, these companies will report to the Treasury Department, kind of like filing an income tax statement. Here's how much coal, oil, or natural gas we sold this year, and here are the permits that we purchased to cover the carbon in those fuels. End of story. So this is non-bureaucratic. Every other business in the entire economy, other than these first sellers of fossil fuels, has no additional regulations, no additional reporting. It's business as usual, except, of course, their price of fossil fuels is higher.